Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the CG Cookie live stream, Blender edition. Today we are doing another film review. So we've got some fun people. We've got Tim Von Rueden above me. We've got Jonathan Lampel below me. We had a lot. I'll speak for myself. I had a lot of fun last time doing the Elephant's Dream review with you guys. I learned a lot about that film from your perspective. So I'm really looking forward to tackling Sintel today. How are you, Tim? What, give me a summary.
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's always great to be back with the CG Cookie fam. Yeah, I don't know. I had a lot of fun too last time. I think these movie reviews are a good way to kind of reflect on where Blender has come from, especially Sintel. I'm curious to talk it out with you guys today because I think this was kind of a game changer.
Yeah, agreed. Well, good, man. Glad to have you back again, and glad to hear that you're doing well. Lampel, how you doing?
Doing great.
Doing great. Anybody got any cool
Yeah.
drinks that they're going to be sipping on? I've got water.
Yeah, I got Mama
Sipping on
Chia.
some tea.
You got your tea, Lampel. Now, what in the world do you have, Von? Art?
Mama Chia.
I think you get the reward for the most exotic drink today. What is that?
Thank
Like,
you.
is that what kind of substance
You
is
can
that?
mail me the award. It's a chia beverage with protein, fiber, and omega-3s.
What in the world? All right, I'll take
Wait,
your
does it
word for
have
that.
the like seeds in it, or is
Yeah.
it just like?
Or wait, I
What?
don't know why I pointed out. See all the seeds in there?
Huh, all right.
It tastes like
I mean,
I don't know,
could be
like a
good.
watery jelly.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. Wow. Okay, so that's a good start to the stream. That's the most fun I've had starting a stream yet. So, hello everybody in the chat. Please, participate with us. Like, ask questions or make comments throughout the review today. We want to make this as communal as possible. And yeah, so I guess we'll get right down to it then. Sintel. This is the third open movie project. It has a bit of a special place, I suppose, in my heart because it was presented to me at a time where I was aware of Blender but didn't take it that seriously. And so seeing this convinced me that it was a very legitimate software capable of producing serious short films. And then it like if that when that clicked for me, all of a sudden the possibilities were limitless. And so I really started to take it seriously from watching Sintel. And I have a kind of a fun story about me discovering Sintel. But before that, like Von, I want to call you Von Art because I'm seeing your Twitter handle right there all the time. Tim,
That's okay.
what do you know about Sintel? Like, how did that show up on your radar?
Okay, so for me, I went to school at AI, the Institute of Art in Schaumburg, and same one that Wes went to. And I think I was shown it in a 3D animation class because literally at that time, it was only 3ds Max or what was the other big one?
Maya?
Maya. And those are like the two that everyone were like industry standard. And Blender was kind of a joke at the time. Like people kind of heard about it, through the grapevine, but it was always laughed upon. And then this movie was shown to us in a class. I don't know if my teacher was just very pro Blender, but as a way to start a discussion and kind of a conversation about what free software was capable of. And I remember we watched it in the class and thinking it was no different than something that was developed with 3ds Max. So for my class, I mean, I wasn't as big into 3D, but the people that were into 3D, it was kind of a big deal. And I kind of learned through them about how big this was.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. That like to frame that perspective. I had something similar that I think the context that I saw it made Blender seem more legitimate than it had ever seemed before, and the fact that it was brought into that conversation alongside with those other softwares. That's pretty cool. That's a really cool exposure. What about you, Lampel? How did Sintel arrive on your radar?
I think I just watched it on YouTube at some point. I don't have any great particular memory. It was about the time I was getting into Blender, so I was like, "Oh, they made a movie. This is cool."
Okay.
I think I had just recently watched Big Buck Bunny
Okay.
and like found out that they made movies, and then they were making this new one, so it was kind of cool to follow along.
Yeah. Totally.
But yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Sounds like we were. I don't know. We were in similar places to be made aware of Sintel. I'll tell this story about how I was made aware of it. Hopefully, you guys will find it interesting. So I was at my first studio gig out of college, and that was a place in Minneapolis called Make Visual. And I arrived there in like October of 2010, which I think the movie was released October 1st. But so it had to be within the first couple weeks I was there, but everybody gathered around at the studio. It was like 8 to 10 people, I think. And they all gathered around to watch their friend's new short film. And so I remember gathering around this monitor with them, and their friend was Colin Levy, and he had worked at the studio, I think, just before leaving to go make Sintel. And so he was their like friend. He worked there, and they knew him. He was a colleague, and we were watching his new film. And I don't know, it was just really impressive, kind of seeing them, and they were not a Blender crowd at the studio, and for them to like kind of respect it because of Colin, and also the visual result that the film is. So that was kind of a fun experience. And then I got into Blender and realized Colin was somewhat of a big deal. He's like a Blender celebrity, having made this film. I met him once at SIGGRAPH, super nice guy. And then he went on, which is probably common knowledge, he went on to go to Pixar, arguably because of his work on Sintel. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was there for several years and just recently left, I think, to pursue like making his own films. So pretty cool stepping stool for Mr. Levy or Levy. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Does anyone know? Lampel, do you know?
I think it's Levy.
Levy.
Oh shoot, I'm second guessing myself.
Okay, I think it is Levy. Now that you mentioned that. Awesome. Okay, so Sintel. Let's get a little bit of background, some stats, so to speak. Again, it is the third open movie. It was the durian codename, which is a fruit. Someone asked in this chat, like, is durian a fruit? And I believe all of their films are like some code name of a fruit. And I never heard of a durian before this. But they are in Zelda Breath of the Wild, I realized.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so it is actually. Wait, I thought, wasn't this one like mango or something?
No, I forgot which one mango was, but it's durian. Yeah, it's definitely durian, I think.
It's in the short.
A durian does appear in the short.
Oh, look at that little secret.
Little nugget. It was released in 2010, again directed by Colin Levy. Based on the blog, I calculated about a year and a half production from when they started doing concepts and working on the story, scripting the story, to when it was released. It was about a year and a half. So that's pretty long. Do you guys remember what the Elephant's Dream one was? I remember putting it on there in the stream, but not. I can't remember the stat. I think it was like 6 months or something, 9 months maybe.
It was a surprisingly short amount of time.
Yeah, right. So this one's longer. Clearly, it was a bit of a bigger deal in terms of that. The team of 8 people originally, which I struck out, and then it became a team of 14 people. They did have to expand, which is, I mean, a pretty big expansion and an unforeseen one as far as I could tell. But so a big production. A keyword that I got out of studying the production was it was very stressful. But it also signified the transition from the Blender 2.4 series into the 2.5 series, which was a monumental transition for the Blender software. And I think the whole community in general, like, it was a big milestone, kind of brought it into the modern era of what a 3D application is supposed to be. And this was the project, the Open Movie project that pushed that transition forward. So that's a pretty big deal. And also I wanted to put in here that there is a documentary about the production on YouTube. I think it's like an hour or so long. It's really, really interesting insight into what the production of the project was like. So check that out. I watched that earlier today and really
I
enjoyed
would
it.
Definitely watch that.
Cool. All right. So I figured we would watch Sintel now. It's about, let's see, it's about 13 minutes, I think, of animation.
Is this the longest one? I feel like maybe it is.
Dude, you might be right. I thought I did a lot of research, but I don't have the answer for that.
Tears of Steel is shorter.
Okay. All right. You might be right about that. I can't remember what Cosmos Laundromat is. I want to say it was close to, if not a little under. But if anyone knows, shout it out. So Tears of Steel was Mango. That's right. Zach said, corrected us there.
It's longer than Cosmos too.
Oh, wow. Okay. Tim, thank you for the quick research.
That's why you have other people on here for you.
All right, so if you grab some popcorn, we'll watch it, and if anybody cries during the the big moments, like put an emoji in the chat or something. But we will get started.
Well, you gotta tell me when you say play.
Oh, I'm sorry, I hit play. You'll be like a second or two behind.
This blade has a dark past. It has shed much innocent blood. You're a fool for traveling alone so completely unprepared. You're lucky your blood's still flowing.
Thank you.
So, what brings you to the land of the gatekeepers?
I'm searching for someone.
Someone very dear. A kindred spirit.
A dragon.
A dangerous quest for a lone hunter.
I've been alone for as long as I can remember. Hey, shh. We're almost done. Hey, sit still. Good night, Scales.
Get him, Scales! Come on, get him! Move!
have failed.
You've only failed to see. These are Dragonlands, Sintel. You are closer than you know.
Scales! Scales? Scales.
take my journey into night.
Tim, how much of this should we
Come
watch?
be my shadow.
The end.
Oh, that you can cut it when you want.
It really is a shame though to do that. Watch the credits at some point. A lot of good names in there. All right, so that's Sintel. We had some people saying that they were crying. I said moistening in the chat. You know, like
Interesting choice of words, but okay. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, wetting. I don't. What's a better term for that?
Ooh, I don't know. You're going
Wetting
down.
yourself.
Okay, it's getting worse, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so that. Let's see. Any first impressions after watching it? Like the first thing that comes to mind when you guys see that? Anything? Anybody emotional about the reveal?
I want to hear your guys' thoughts first.
I'm getting a no from Tim. I don't usually get emotional, but I don't know. I was a little connected that
it was
time.
a little bit,
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay, you see us streaming again?
Sure do.
Hey everybody, sorry about that. My power flickered and turned everything off. So I hope you guys are still with us. Sorry about the inconvenience, but luckily we just finished the Sintel viewing, so hopefully you guys are still here. Let me know if like audio is all fine. It was like a rush job to get set up, so if anything's messed up, let me know. And so as far as like getting into the actual review part of the film, the way we like to organize our review process is to first look at the story, which I would argue is the most is the primary reason like short films are made. It's the most important thing. So we'll look at that first, and then we'll look at the artistry, sort of like a visual identity, artistic expression that the film achieved. Or didn't, I guess, if that doesn't work out. And then also the technical execution, where we get into the Blender nerdy things and like really look at the pixels, you know, and critique it. So that is that we're going to start with the story. And so story-wise, Tim, I feel like you might be a good person to start with. Or do you want to end with you? What do you think?
I think for this one, it'd be better I start because I think. Well, yeah, let me start this one off.
Okay.
Go for it.
Right.
I didn't really take notes on this one beforehand, so I'm curious
just
to hear
free
where you go,
rolling.
and then
All
you can
right.
bounce off of that.
Very cool.
Because I definitely don't like with the last one, it was definitely a lot of metaphors floating around and it was interpretive. I feel like this one's very simple, it's very direct, and I'm not the biggest fan of misunderstanding stories because I feel like there really isn't a moral lesson to be had, or there's nothing that you take away that you feel you learn something from it, but instead it's like it was an accident and it was unfortunate. So I think it is more of a tearjerker. It'll grab you if you're like into the story. But besides that, I thought besides being a simple one, I thought it was effective for what it needed to do, and I think it did a good job with the pacing. But yeah, I don't think it has a lot of like deeper sentimental feeling for me as the other one, or even like Cosmos Laundromat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you guys felt about, because for me it was a very simple, cut, clean story, and it was just kind of a misunderstanding.
Yeah, I do think we might align on some things. With as far as that, I think for me I took some notes. What I thought was admirable about the story is I think it was polished and it was central. I think that Colin, and I got this a lot from watching the documentary, but I think he took his role as director very seriously in that it was all about the story. Like I think he took a lot of time and wrote out with Esther, I forgot her last name, but they really took a lot of time to work out this story. The story influenced all aspects of the production and governed everything, and he pushed that forward really hard. I think to the point where he probably got annoying to people. That's pretty apparent in the documentary. Like, he would make decisions with the story that, prolonged the production. It goes from like 6 minutes to 9 minutes to like 12 minutes. He just keeps polishing off the story. And so, but this is what I think about the story. I'm more with you, Tim, in that this felt a little, the story feels a little bit familiar. Like it's got the best way I could describe it was it feels like a very good film education applied, right? So you learn what makes a good story. You learn that when there's a hero, there's always a like call to action. There's always a mentor that you run into. It had all those aspects of like a story that you learn in school, or you learn from watching filmmakers, and it didn't have, it wasn't heavy on the unique expression or unique story narrative or like the things that like I got out of Cosmos Laundromat. To me, like that had a good balance of being of a polished story, but also something a little unique to intrigue. This one, I felt like I had seen all the ideas before, and so in that sense, there was a little bit lacking. But what was new to the production of the Blender Institute, as far as I can tell, is that the story was generally secondary to the technical demonstration of what Blender was achieving during that project. And so I respect Colin for pushing the story so much. And in the documentary, even Ton said, like, we really wanted to make story paramount. So in that way, I think it's a big thumbs up for focusing on the story. But I agree with you that maybe it feels a little familiar and mainstream compared to like Elephant Stream, especially, which was like way out there, not mainstream at all. Like this one was the pendulum swing the other way, in my opinion.
I think the one miss that they really could have played up as a viewer is the reveal that she's older felt like a very weird, cheap reveal when she's looking in the blood, because we as the audience member can see her enter the cave looking a little younger, kind of like she did earlier. For me, if they would have just had her in a cloak or a cape where it was kind of hard to see her, and it was hard for then Scales to see her too, I think it would have made a better connection than when, if like it got blown off or something at the end and then you see that she's older and then Scales realize it's her. I think it would have been a better reveal. I think that could have been handled a lot better, because in my mind, her just aging, just looking in the blood was a very sloppy way of connecting the dots that, oh, it's been a lot of years since, and that's why Scales is older.
Right. I can imagine that was a tricky thing to tell. I would guess that like there were a lot of ways to do that. The first time I ever watched Sintel, I did not get it. And I was like, why is she old all of a sudden? Like it didn't click with me. Looking back at it now, I don't hate the way that the reveal happens, and I like the secondary scene where it shows like all of her travels kind of like whip past her in the background. I thought that was a good way to tell, an interesting way to tell like the passage of time. But yeah, there's a lot of questions. Someone mentioned in the chat like, you know, save a dragon by a mirror. You know, like. That kind of, you know, pretty big plot holes, you know, with that whole thing. How did she not notice that she was old? So yeah, to your point, like, I don't know. I did not see the plot twist coming. Did you guys?
Well, it's because I felt like we were lied to, because her entering the cave, that's not what she actually looked like.
You're not wrong about that.
But like a simple cloak, like could it easily... I think bypass this whole discussion, and then neither us or Sintel would have known if she was older or how long. I mean, I'm assuming she's known it's been a while.
I see what you're. Yeah, like she could have like covered herself up from the elements, like you know. Yeah, there could have been. It could have been handled a little differently.
That is true, because like other than that, there's not really any cut, because right before that, she's at the shaman's place. And if she's wearing this exact same clothes, has the exact same haircut, all of that, like none of it means anything's different. So the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, this is like 3 days later or something, you know?
Right.
The hair was another thing I noted, is why wasn't her hair longer? Or if she did cut it, so she styled it the exact same way. I know this is probably just a 3D like time production thing, but I think they could have handled that one a bit better.
No, that's a pretty good point. It's funny. I'm remembering back to when I was thrown off when that initially happened. Since then, since I've known the story, like I watch it knowing what's happening next, and I can appreciate that better. I bet that's hard as a writer to know where the story's going, but to make it as if you don't, almost. Like, how do you preserve that temporalness to the story, right? Does that make sense? Like, if Colin knows what's happening, it could be easy any of the writers to not think about like the hair would be longer or
I think you have to.
I feel like it could be easy to lose sight of those elements because you're
actually,
so
yeah.
omnipotent.
No, you're right. It is easy to lose sight of it, but I think that's where you need someone expressing like, hey, something feels off.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a really good point to make. So let's say that the story is not groundbreaking in terms of a narrative to be told, but would you agree that he stuck to that narrative very tightly from cinematography, character development, pretty much all the aspects of the production were centered around that maybe less than fantastic narrative?
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
mean, they definitely centralized it on
Yeah.
the relationship between them and her journey to find him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with
Everything really pointed to that, even in the city and all of that stuff. Was made very specifically, so I think that works. But it also, I don't know, I did get a sense of a larger world, but even though like the world itself was very narrow.
Yeah, true. I think that so Colin went on to work at Pixar as a layout artist and framing shots and I guess in somewhat affecting like the edit a little bit, like kind of influencing that. So in that, knowing that about him, knowing that he was like sought out for those skills, I do think that those are present in this film more than the other, especially more than the previous Blender films. I think there is a lot of good editing work. I like the scenes that come to mind. I love when the big dragon takes Sintel. Let me see if I can find that. Sorry, it doesn't take Sintel. Takes the smaller scales and like right at the moment where, he steals her.
I mean,
Him.
there's a ton of good like compositions.
Yeah, I wrote down like the ones that I really thought stood out to me.
Oh, well, let's go through those. Yeah, I'll
Like-
so I'm showing right now the one where it's like real time, and then the dragon snatches the small one, and it slows down and really like zooms in on her face and frames that really well. And I love he does that kind of slow down very tastefully, very craftily, in my opinion. I really like the specific shots. So do you have some you'd like me to point out?
I was very impressed with, I think, the rain scene where she's climbing. I like that they didn't try to make her look pretty. It looked matted and I could feel how awful that must have been walking through it. So that was just, I guess, one thing that I noticed. But in terms of shots, it was kind of a juxtaposition because the shot before it I thought was really bad. It was when she first meets Scales, the one where she's like flipping over the board and like trying to find the food. I thought that was really rough. But then when she goes to climb up and you see Scales for the first time, and then it's like this very quick, it's like a 3-thing angle with the camera. And I could feel like that hesitation of Scales. I could feel I was there. It wasn't just a camera. I felt in the moment. And they had a few moments where like it was more than just a panning shot. It was like in the moment you felt you were there in the scene.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the one you're describing. I'm at the part where, by the way, that's the durian. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but
The spiky fruit?
yeah, the
Or
little
one
spiky
before?
fruit. That's the durian. That's a shout out
So
to the
after he falls, she climbs the roof, and then literally the first time you see Scales with him bleeding,
Yeah, I'm at that part right
it's
now.
like it's like a handheld cam versus what they were doing before, which are kind of like over the head panning.
Oh, you're right. And from her perspective, it's very firm. Yeah, I like that.
It kind of just showed me that there would be a range or like a variety in camera angles and shots rather than just this overhead, very nice pan camera. And they do nice pans. I don't want to like dog on that because I do like a nice pan camera, but
Right.
it was nice to shake it up and have both.
Definitely. Yeah. There is a polish to this. A part of the mainstream like feeling about it is that it's done very well. And it does kind of feel like a good applied film education that Colin, and he went to Savannah College of Art and Design, by the way. So we can assume that he has a pretty good film education.
This shot too.
Which one are you
Is
talking
also a
about?
good
Yeah, let me
one.
find that one.
I think the one that you're on right now.
Oh, where she's coddling Scales?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like a nice, well laid out shot.
I agree. The composition, you could argue that like this little guy is kind of circling back around to the focal point. I'm talking about that. Well, I don't know how to describe
Just
it.
like as it moves, that little time lapses.
Oh, that's the one you're talking about.
Effective.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple, but it's effective.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you mentioned the variety, Tim. because there is quite a variety of the shots.
Well, it's funny. It's not only with the camera work, but I also felt, I don't know if you guys are big at like sound editors or even background scores, but they did a really good job with having this kind of adventure, fun background music. But then as soon as she enters the cave, it's like silent. And the only thing you hear is this ambiance of like cave echo, but it's really soft and it like adds to the tension. And it's one of the first like scenes where I could feel scared. I felt nervous for her because you don't know what's going to happen. I think part of it was you didn't have this orchestral score kind of carrying you through and like laying you through the motions. Instead, it just goes silent and you're like hyper aware, kind of like a horror movie of, oh, like what's going on? Like what's happening?
I never noticed that. That's super cool.
I love audio cuts in film or like the way that it's edited. And this one was kind of a reminder of why what you might be talking about, the polish, it like seemed to go to another level.
Yeah.
It's because they're making decisions like this that do have kind of a higher refined taste to it.
Right. Yes, 100%. That's the feeling I got. But man, I've never noticed that. I'm going to watch it differently now at that final scene. Let's see if there's any other things. I think that's kind of about it for the story, in my opinion. Maybe we'll move on then to the artistry section. You guys cool with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sweet. So yeah, the artistry, the way the bullet points to define this is like the film's identity, the visual style, and an appeal of it from a visual perspective. And what do you guys think? Like, did it? I would describe the visual style as respectable, straightforward, not overly unique.
Yeah, I wrote down classic.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. They're in the documentary. They do talk about the conversation of style that came about, and they had David Revoix, I think is how you pronounce his name, who was the concept designer, and he kept bringing, or he at least in the documentary brought up the style conversation, and so it seemed like one that they definitely had, but it felt more like a conglomerate of like general animation style kind of put into one. Compare it to like a Tim Burton Nightmare Before Christmas. Like that visual style is incredibly pronounced. And this definitely does not have that. Or How to Train Your Dragon doesn't really have one either, in my opinion. And so this was kind of in that realm. It's not, I don't think too many people, like it'll win awards for like the visual style, but it's definitely respectable, I would say.
Sure, but the style is very consistent throughout.
Yes, it is
Right.
consistent. And that's a good point to make. Now with that, I do think it qualifies as being appealing. Often generic things are appealing to a bigger audience. I think they wanted to be, if you want to be noticed to some degree, I'm sure you have to, in maybe anything that you do, you have to consider like the mainstream aspect and favor some generic choices. Do you think that's a fair statement to make about being respected in a broader audience?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I did want to say though, I think the one thing that I did find a little different, and I think maybe it was for a good reason, was Sintel and the shaman guy.
Yeah.
I feel like the shaman guy had more of a realism look, where Sintel had more of an animation look to her with like the bigger eyes, the smaller nose, the pointy chin.
Right.
And I thought it was it worked, but if they would have pushed it a little further with Sintel, I think she would have looked really out of place, because the older dragon felt very real, but then the younger dragon felt more cartoony. So I think it did have a nice mix of the two, but I think they were definitely dancing on a thin line of making it very contrasty.
Yeah. So Lampel, did you watch the documentary? I linked you to it. I guess, Tim, I didn't link you to it. I didn't know if you would be.
I want to watch it though.
Okay.
I did, yeah. I watched through it this morning.
So
Super
I wanted to ask you, I was so struck by, I felt like there was a tension within that production, and they were very transparent with like disagreements. There weren't any arguments in the documentary or anything, but like they showed the concept of the shaman who had like at one point had like 4 arms, and then it cuts to Colin and he's like, yeah, that was a bit much. Like sort of writes it off, pretty quickly. And there's a couple instances of that, not just Colin doing it, but Ton doing it at certain points, where there just felt like a tension about it. Did you get that sense at all, Lampel?
I definitely got the sense of tension. Maybe I didn't pick up on it as much about the style in particular. Like, there's definitely moments, but it seemed like a lot of the tension was just throughout just finishing the project and getting things in the right workflows and getting things working.
Yeah, that's what I mean too. Not specifically about style, but
okay.
But just the production in general seemed to weigh very heavy on.
Oh yeah,
on this
especially with like changing the story halfway through and whatnot. Like,
oh, did they really?
That'll do it.
Oh yeah. Well, I think Colin. I mean, there wasn't like a distinct timeline in the documentary, but the first team. You guys got to watch the documentary, by the way. It's really, really interesting. But
you're me intrigued.
There's a first team of like 8 people that were the original team to make the whole film, and I don't know how many months they worked on it before the story had changed enough and had expanded the project that they had to like. Almost said order new people. They had to hire like 6 more artists to finish the thing. So I think the reality of production being what it is, very difficult, especially when you want to do it like a high quality. I think that took a toll on this production, and yeah, I think Colin was changing story elements pretty deep into the production, from what I could tell. And I mean, in a way, like that sucks. I would have been one of the artists. I wouldn't have been the director of this, and I would have been like, dude, I've modeled that already. Like, we gotta move on. I would have been frustrated by it, but I do respect that he seemed to take that mantle of like, no, story first. I'm sorry I'm pissing you guys off, but like the story needs to be, and he made a comment that I thought was really good. He was like, my job, I feel, is to make sure that the final product is worthy of all the work that we're doing. And
I like that quote.
Yeah, I like that quote
That's
a lot.
good. Yeah.
I mean, but when you think about it, what a real life application setting on a smaller scale, because when you work at a game or a movie studio, yeah, rewrites and reshoots happen, or then you might have to throw. I mean, I've talked to Wes even about things that he had to just throw away months of work, or even you, Kent, with the movies.
Oh, absolutely. It's very real. And I mean, yeah, it's just, it sucks how hard it is to make movies, especially make good animated movies. Like, that's just a really difficult thing.
This is long. This is not like when you think short movie, usually it's like 5 minutes roughly. I mean, this is double that.
Yeah, for sure. This is no small token, but I do think it paid off. I think all that work was to take the Blender movies a little out of the shadows of the CG, community, and make it more legitimate, make it like attempt at a mainstream thing. And I think that it paid off because, like, I know Lampel and I think we would say that seeing Sintel, if it didn't cause us to get more into Blender, it definitely helped that transition.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, could you recognize watching that documentary that maybe they felt the pressure internally as well, that this is something that we need to promote Blender on a larger scale?
I don't know that I would describe it that way. I mean, the tension to me, you could cut with a knife. Like,
really?
In the comments of the YouTube of the YouTube thread, they're like, these guys are so dull, they're so boring, and like, I kind of know them. I'm big fans of them, so like, I don't just write them off that way. But I do. There is like, I think it's the stress. I think it's the weight of this whole project. I mean, 1.5 years. You don't have a ton of money to do this. Like, you're not going to make a lot of money doing this, if any. Like, you can see it, I think, all over their face. Now, if they felt like they needed to do it to put Blender to the next level for the world, I don't know that I would say that. Almost starts to sound like a little sellout-ish. I did not get that sense at all, but
or more or less like, if this goes well, we could really change the industry. But if it flops, are we continuing the Blender as a joke conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that has to be part of it. You could not have those.
I'm sure they would not film that and they would not talk about it on camera. Right. But I'm sure there had to be dialogue behind the scenes of, we need this to be something.
Yeah, I mean, they're not putting all this work in for nothing. They're not being paid to promote the movie or anything. But so yeah, I think for Ton especially, and man, he seems like a hard dude to work for. Like,
right?
Oh my word, he's like very blunt, and like, how long is this going to take? Why is it going to take that long? When do we get a final picture? He kept saying like final picture, like final renders. When are we going to get this? He just seems like, the kind of producer who's like prodding you along hardcore, which just has its very positive aspects. But very difficult as an artist maybe to work for. Yeah, and he even talks in the documentary about how he's really trying to push the productivity of people. So I'm sure for Ton, he has to be thinking stuff like that all the time. Like, how do we push Blender forward? I can't imagine. I don't even know what his motivation is for doing so much for free, and the way he's done. He's got that open source mindset and freedom of information and art and all that stuff.
And I guess if you look hindsight, I mean, it worked. I mean, you've been hearing our stories about what Sintel, like the memory we had watching it and what that meant at the time.
Yeah.
So maybe like they, or maybe even Tan specifically, kind of knew that there was something bigger if they could just put it in the right light.
Yeah. I think that
makes sense. And they really did blend it together well. Like, it didn't feel just like a tech demo or just like, because there's such a variety of different scenes.
Yeah.
But it works into the story fairly well.
Right. Yeah, I think this is one of, I think the prior two films, Big Buck Bunny and Elephant's Dream, were more arguably in the realm of a tech demo. They always had a story, but I don't think people would argue that it was primary. I like Big Buck Bunny's story, but it doesn't take much work to make that kind of thing happen. I'm sorry, I don't mean to discredit whoever wrote the story, but I would say it's a fairly simplistic, fun story.
Sure.
I think that was the objective too.
Yeah, I think so too. What was I I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, someone mentioned in the chat, don't forget that this was the transition to 2.5. And imagine we're talking about the stress of a production, and we haven't even really talked about, add in the fact that the software is actively being developed. Tools are not even there that you need. And they're adding that stuff, because the transition, the documentary was talking about how at the beginning, large chunks of the software that was in 2.4 had not been merged into 2.5. And I can't imagine being like, all right, I'm ready to model this character, and the cut edge loop tool is not there. Like, I can't do it. Like, what in the world? And so like they were having the developers on board. Like, it couldn't have been more perfect storm against the success of the production, I feel like.
I did not know that. Yeah, that makes it even more impressive then.
Right. Yeah, and having that stuff in mind really does make you look at this stuff a little differently. Unfortunately, the world's not going to care about that kind of stuff. They just want to see a powerful film. And Sintel, I think it served that purpose.
And kind of as such, like, it's held up over time.
Yeah, agreed.
The fact that even that simplistic story, while it might be more familiar now, like we've seen it a few times or whatever, it's not tired, or it's not
right. It's kind of timeless.
Yeah,
completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, let's get into we've actually been talking it's been like an hour, but let's get into the technical stuff, because there is a lot. I made a ton of technical notes, pros and some cons in there, but let's start talking about the technical execution. Quality of animation, quality of modeling, shading, lighting, etc. We've talked about the story, but now we're going to nerd out a bit. And Tim, I think you have notes on this stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you left out a detail that I think is interesting. You were in college when you saw Sintel for 3D animation, not for like concept art.
Yeah, no, I didn't learn any concept art in my school.
That's so interesting.
So it's funny now when I'm at shows, I tell people the truth. Like, my background's actually in 3D modeling, and I even did a bit of programming.
What?
Which I never really told people. Yeah, it was super simple. Like, my school did, it was like Flash, and then I forgot what the other one was. But yeah, I made a little side scroller game, and I did all the art for it. But like, you didn't have to make all the art, but like, that's what I was interested in.
So
nice.
Why did you not think to pursue like concept art in school and instead go the 3D route?
To be honest, I went to AI. I was such a naive little Wisconsin kid, thinking like I would make video games and I would be the art person. But when you go there, they really focus more on the 3D aspects and the animation and things of like rendering and like building your open world, whatever it might be. And I guess it never clicked in my mind that like concept art might be a different field of study, that I should have gone to like a SCAD or California or somewhere that's a little more specialized in it.
Right.
So halfway through, I was thinking about leaving, and I was like, I'm just gonna be a kid's book illustrator. But I stuck with it, and I just kind of did concept stuff on my own end. And then I mean, I tell the story about how I graduated with a D- in my portfolio, but that portfolio is what landed me a job at CG Cookie.
Whoa.
So it's
full
ironic that I
circle.
went to the portfolio show with something that almost failed me out of that class, and then I got my job because of that portfolio.
That's
Dude,
funny.
I should interview you on stream and we can talk about your whole story because that's quite interesting.
It's a weird one, yeah.
So,
But no, I'm glad that we're gonna talk about the technical stuff last, because I think it's good to point out what works and kind of give a base for when this film was made and the technical difficulties before critiquing it, because then I feel like it would be unfair if we just went in and critiqued it, because I do have a lot of notes on like little technical stuff that I think could have either looked better or choices that could have been made to revise some things.
There's some, I think more so than any other Blender film that I can think of, Blender Institute film, there are like really beautiful parts and really kind of underfinished parts. Trying to think of a nice way to say that. And I've never seen it so kind of inconsistent, like on the technical, texture resolution or quality of shading. There's a big distinction depending on the shot.
There's one that I'm sure that you both noticed, being 3D guys, but I guess to start off, that alleyway.
Okay, towards the beginning.
Unfinished looking part that they could have just cut out and it wouldn't have made a difference.
I'm looking at that. I believe that only alleyway that I'm really aware of.
Where she like flips the
piece of wood. I agree with you. To me, like there's a grayish taupe tone to everything in there that it's like, I mean, why not shift that up a little bit? And
it's like they forgot the shadow render.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I do see what you mean. And the texture resolution looks okay. I don't want to bash it, and so I want to be careful with the way I say things, but because there are other aspects that are so well polished that it's just, that one does stand out to me as like all those blocks. There's a lot of blocks there, so geometrically you've got some good detail, but like the texture resolution is pretty bad. It just looks like a gray render, like you didn't even texture it at some points.
Or maybe it could be a little bit, because you can see that the blocks on the right definitely have that some texture detail. So I think what it is that it's the whole alleyways in shadow. And so you're seeing the shadows based on the ambient occlusion, but you're not getting any lighting information. So all of that bump mapping just disappears because there's no light hitting it.
That's a good
beyond
point.
the environment.
Look at you flexing those technical muscles. I think you're right. I think you're right.
Because that used to be an issue in Blender internal and renderers that don't have
global
bounce lighting by default.
That's a good point. That is a really good point. But you could change, all the blocks don't need to be the same gray. You can, hand painted textures don't need that information, don't need bumps or global illumination to look pretty nice. But this one, there's just not a lot of variety in the texture specifically. It kind of looks, in this specific shot that I'm looking at, like you say on the right side, there's a good amount of detail kind of in the normal map. But then in the shadow, it looks like game res from a few years ago. So it kind of weaves in and out. Sometimes it looks like a rendered high quality animation frame. And then other times it does look like game resolution.
Yeah,
and
I thought the same thing.
I can't help but wonder if this was an aspect where the story changed a lot and really hindered the production. Because in the documentary, to their credit, several times they said the stress of production or changes to things meant that they had to accept a level that was lower than what they knew they could do. And I think that the city has to be an example of that. Because it does just look like an oversight that we know that they're capable of much better work. So
it's weird because then as soon as she flips the second board up where she gets the fruit, it feels like you're back in a nice rendered animation scene.
Yeah, because the fruit is has a lot of displaced detail.
I'd be really curious to see what order these were worked on in.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing, I've been referencing the documentary a lot. Again, you got to watch it. It's really interesting. But a detail in there is when the new group came in and said, and to join in the production, it was almost unanimous between them that they were surprised at how little was finished about the production. So I would guess then that this scene in particular was maybe done early and not later, because I think the cave scene, there are some shots that are leagues better than early on. Anyway, yeah, so let's, I'm going to look at my notes and try and find, I've got some specific scenes too. How about some good things? I'm going to talk about some, I think the snow scene and the rain scene are quite good. That's the opening scene when we first get into the film in general. I remember being impressed right away when that started. It's like, oh, okay, so we're really getting into this. Like this is legit. It established a very good vibe to the film.
I think it helped that this is a little bit stylized as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas you can kind of get away with a little bit more simpler things. It's just simple and clean and well shaded. Whereas in the city, they try to make everything look realistic, and it's maybe a little.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
To do that.
I agree with you. I think it's not quite consistent as it needs to be, and I'll show you a very specific point. One of them is when the title sequence happens, and you see like the title of the movie Sintel, when she's walking. Let me see where that is.
That's like 1:30.
1:30. Oh, okay, here we go. So in this shot, you can look on the left, and there is a very high frequency detail of like these stalagmite type shapes, very, very displaced, a lot of detail going on. And then on the right side of the shot, just a little beyond, a little back in distance wise, and it's very simplistic, like game res geometry from what I can tell. And at one point they're like really close to each other, maybe 20 feet or so away from each other. And like, that's such a stark difference. On the left, it's very broken up, and you can see the silhouettes like very jagged. And so my brain, I think, accepts that side of the frame as like, okay, this is a rendered, not a game asset thing, or not like a very simplified style. And then on the right, it does look simplified. And so I'm confused as to that aesthetic, I guess. Because you're right, Lampel, that if you commit to that style and it's simplistic, it can be a beautiful thing. But when you have both, and it ends up feeling like the simpler stuff didn't have enough time to be finished in a way.
Yeah,
got me like super curious.
Throughout a little bit.
Go ahead, Lampel. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that runs throughout a little bit. Yeah,
you're right. There's a couple other scenes that I had about that. The city scenes, that was another one. Okay, so this one was like, I can't not see it once I see it the first time. So, sorry, I'm looking, Tim, my frame in VLC is counting down. So when you said 1:30, I had to do like some quick subtraction.
Oh, so, gotcha.
But, okay, right here, I'm looking at, I'm looking at 9:51 left in the film. Does that make sense to you?
If you tell me what scene, I'll be able to find it.
Okay, it's at the top of the ziggurat, where like the big pyramid-like thing. It's maybe like a third the way through the whole film.
After she left the city?
Yeah, at the top of the city where the dragon's flying.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay, so in that, there's a very specific shot that I'm looking at right now, but this object literally does not look textured, and it's kind of the foreground. And I don't know if it was, I don't know if it was an error and just it got unnoticed, but like this broken statue looks like a literal gray model with a little bit of like normal map or sculpting detail.
Oh, I see it.
And then behind it, there's like an actual textured version. So like that kind of inconsistency, potential oversight really throws me off as like a technical Blender shader artist. I just can't not see that kind of thing. Do you see what I'm talking about, Lampel?
Oh yeah, because like the floor of that is really well
detailed.
Textured.
Right, beautifully textured.
Like, extremely well. And then that is a bit odd. Even though, isn't that even more of a central piece? Because doesn't it get broken? Or maybe that was just in the...
No, a piece does get broken. Oh, I think you're right. Let's see here. Let me skip a little bit. How do I do
are you talking where she's like taking a breath at the very top and it's behind her?
Yeah.
Oh, that's even worse.
It kind of looks like Play-Doh.
Right. And I mean, when I see that, it's just weird to get right beside, like you said, on the floor, very detailed, very nicely done. and then that one's so unfinished. I just can't help but think that it was part of the scramble to like get the thing done, and you just can't have the level of quality control that you know you're capable of. But
this is also a great example, though, of less is more. You could have cut that statue out, wouldn't have affected anything.
You're right, except Lampel actually hit the nail on the head that the dragon kicks it over, and
okay, so they did
part of
leave
it.
But even that, I think just the way the kick happened and how it broke,
it looks
probably would have been better
quality.
just to leave it out.
I think you're right, because the broken piece lands right in front of the camera, and it looks like a flipping 512 texture size.
And you can see the cut before it actually falls apart too.
Oh yeah.
Which I feel bad just like dogging on this, but like only because that's all things that I've had in my renders for sure.
Right. And I think by being so critical of it, there's got to be a point rather than just to like to knock it. But I think that kind of stuff it's just part of it, right? Like you can't ignore that kind of thing. It's part of it, and when you're pushing forward Blender, you're pushing forward like this story. I don't know. They're just unfortunate stains on it. And
I think it's good to look at stuff objectively and constructively review and critique what could have been improved upon, so that people watching, or when you give it out, they can learn upon it and then improve upon it for further creation.
For sure. But we can switch gears into some quality stuff. You mentioned the rain scene. I couldn't agree more with you. I think that scene, the people involved in that, the way you converted stuff that wasn't ready for rain into rain ready is absolutely beautiful. Feels so wet,
great.
Cold, and I mean that looks incredible. And they didn't even have like cycles reflections at that point. It's like just specular stuff. But the way that the rain is hitting on the surface, like you can't. I'm looking at where she initially gets into the rain, and like the ground texture quality is super high res, and the droplets look beautiful. There's grass on the left side that's high frequency detail. Just comparing that to the pillar that we just talked about is night and day, and it's just an interesting contrast. But yeah, her skin shading, there's like subsurface all through it, and I think it's actually really nice considering the more stylized aesthetic to especially Sintel and the shape of her like anatomy. So I think they did a good job with like, it's not too waxy, it's not overly translucent. It's a good amount. And in that rain scene, like she looks freezing. It's really, really well done.
Can we talk about the hair? I thought the hair was so well done. And even having like some of the strings matted, almost like glued to her head, it felt real. I could feel it.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were talking about in general, and that was going to be a negative,
no.
rabbit trail.
Well, the way that her hair was so matted down, I'm assuming they had to make a whole new.
I think you're right.
Render of that.
Look at that. That's beautiful.
Because her hair before that looked like a video game during that time period where it was kind of hair, but it still had like that flowy look to it. Then all of a sudden the rain scene comes and you're like, that looks like hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It looks so nice. Yeah, I'm paused on that frame right now, and yeah, it's seamless. Like you don't question for a bit that it's a different hairstyle or a different model entirely, probably. Okay, so we've been really deep in the conversation. I don't want to miss any questions, and I see someone has one. Zach, you use the temporary but necessary like question preface in all caps. Thank you for that. Is it because of the volumetrics? And you asked that 6 minutes ago. What were you talking about? Were we talking about the pillar 6 minutes ago?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. I don't know that there's volumetrics. I can't think where that's particularly relevant to the pillar, but if we were talking about something else, the mountains. Okay, so the atmospheric depth. Let me go back to that scene real quick. Where was that? Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Okay, right here. So you're right, there's volumetrics and a like a snowy atmosphere going on. And so I think if I were to be critical of like thinking on an artist perspective, that maybe that was a reason to not up the detail. But but it's the fact that if I can just go back like a frame, I don't know VLC as well as I wish I did. Okay. The fact that right here, just imagine I'm circling these rocks, like these all are the high frequency detail of this. And right beside it, that frequency of detail is gone. And it's very smooth silhouettes, very simplified silhouettes. So that's what makes me say that it's not because of the volumetrics. I think the volumetrics were designed to hide that. But it's just not hidden quite well enough, in my opinion. Maybe it was a render, like memory issue that they couldn't like duplicate this level of detail all across these rocks. But I think that would have made for a more seamless, consistent detail level. Hope that answered your question. But yeah, definitely foggy. On that point, though, I would like to say that make a note that some scenes in particular looked overly composited, in my opinion. And by overly composited, I mean that you make the whole scene in 3D and the animation works together with all the geometry, but then you light it and render it at different stages, right? Like you just light and render the environment, and then you render that out by itself, and then you render out the character by itself, all for the sake of lower render times, and you reconstruct the scene or the image in the compositor. And so where that goes negative, in my opinion, like when something's overly composited, it feels like a kit bash of images rather than like this was all rendered in the same scene. And in particular, it's right here. So I'm at the beginning snow scene, guys, and so the atmosphere is extremely foggy, snowstorm like, and like an overcast day, but the shadow and lighting on her face is fairly stark. And so there's a disconnect right away. Like the shadows are also very dark, and any light that's there will reflect off the snow. And I looked up this image real quick of like a little kid in a similar overcast day. And there are no stark shadows. Like all of it's very soft, almost pure ambient occlusion. But the bouncing off of the snow lightens the shadows significantly. Whereas, in this shot, like it looks like it's a fairly sunny day. And when the other guy enters the scene too, that happens.
That's a great catch.
I did not even catch that. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, I mean, I told this chat, I've been in Sintel world for the last couple days, pretty hardcore. But yeah, this shot, like, look how stark the shadows are and you can see like the transition off from how like clearly she's lit, and then the rock right behind her is less contrasted and more in the atmosphere of the snowstorm. And so that's an example of what I mean by overly composited, where the separate pieces were rendered separately in different lighting conditions and then brought back together. But it's not terrible or anything. It was something that stood out to me.
Oh man, now I can't not see that, because when she kills him and you see his face, there's a really stark highlight in both of his eyes and on his teeth, but that wouldn't be there.
Let's see, I'm almost to that part. Yeah. I mean, it's good. I think it's good lighting. It's just inconsistent lighting. Oh yeah, right there.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to see the sun. So why would there be this really stark pinched highlight?
Right. And I mean, it could very well have been that they lit it, accurately, but it just didn't look good. And so it was an artistic decision, like, people, let's showcase the detail a little bit more, which you kind of need stark shadows and lights, highlight information to showcase detail. Yeah, so I mean, it's not bad. It's just something that kind of sticks out to me as undercooked. Let's see. Any other scenes that you guys want to point out in particular? I've got a pretty big list.
I only have, I guess, 3 that I'd want to knock out quickly.
Okay.
The one that felt kind of weird to me, and I want to hear your guys' opinion, was the snow. When she picks up her weapon, did not feel like snow to me at all.
Yes. Let me. I'm almost right there.
I was trying to figure out what it looked like. It almost was like a gel with glitter in it, or like the magic sand or Play-Doh. It wasn't snow. Okay, so you kind of got that same vibe.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. It felt, again, like kind of what games were able to do. Yeah, okay, we're at that scene right now. And
it feels bad critiquing it, because it's like, at that time, I'm sure that was incredibly difficult to do snow. And then you see things with like the Frozen documentaries on how difficult it was to render snow.
Yeah.
I'm assuming with the tools that were at their disposal, it was probably really difficult.
I think that's part of it.
Good job as far as like, that seems so hard, because technically, I think what did they have to do? All shape keys?
Right. I'm wondering that too. Was it a soft body simulation, or was it like if it was a soft
I don't
body
think they can even
simulation?
do that.
They couldn't do that back then.
I mean, they could, but for snow, like it wouldn't react that way.
Zach says dynamic paint.
Dynamic paint definitely
Dynamic
was
paint
not.
wasn't even in there.
Yeah, that definitely was not a thing back then. Like, remember, this is such a peeled, a like skimmed down version of Blender. Like they were adding tools all the time, but like what we have today, a lot of that was not back then. So here's my issue: if it's shape keys, is like, I mean, if it's shape keys, like I can sculpt with a multi-resolution, which we know they had. You can add a lot of detail very quickly with a simplified shape key on the base geometry. But like that would have taken, I don't know, 10-20 minutes to get right. Maybe the multi-res back then rendered really slow, and so it was very costly. I'm just trying to fill in blanks, but it wouldn't have been that difficult or that time consuming to up-res that geometry significantly if you're just using shape keys. Now, whoever did that, I'm sure if they ever see this, are like screaming at this, like, you don't know what it was like.
You have no idea.
Right, and I don't. I gotta own that. But as artists seeing this, we can't help but just notice that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I do agree that it looks.
It looks like jelly. Yeah.
Jelly. Yeah.
It was cool. It just wasn't snow.
Right. It almost got it. Almost got there, but ended up falling a little bit short.
The only other two ones I had were the texture. I love the variety of textures.
Mm-hmm.
There were times where I felt like they wanted to showcase it, but I felt they were strongest when they did have a depth of field blur to a lot of their shots. And there was one specifically when Sintel meets Scales. She has a nice blur and like frame of focus on her. But then when they go to Scales, it's like everything's in focus, including the roof, the wall next to Scales. And if they would have just put Scales in focus, it would have made the scene feel more rich, but instead it felt more of unpolished. And you're right, it's that inconsistency of polished versus unpolished, and then having it literally the next frame, it was definitely jarring for me.
I'm looking at that scene right now, and yeah, we're looking at Sintel, clearly a depth of field effect behind her. And then when we look at Scales, let's see, I think when she gets closest.
Yeah, like right when the first shot of Scales bleeding, like the wall behind him is super, super textured and rendered.
You're right.
Like everything. But if they would have just did a quick blur around it, nice like vignette of blur, it wouldn't have been as jarring.
The technical issue with that is like Scales is backed up against the wall. So to actually get a blurring of that geometry, you'd have to have like a really, really shallow depth of field, I guess. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
To where like, you know, you get a little bit of blur on the wall, but everything behind the wall is crazy blurred. So that would have been difficult, but I'm trying to think how you would solve that, because I do feel
I would make the wall or the roof less textured then, because it's such a granular texture.
Yeah, really high frequency.
And then Scales almost looks unfinished or unpolished or unrefined because of how refined the wall is.
That's a good point.
But I mean, I'm nitpicking at this point. Like anyone hearing, I'm nitpicking, and
that's all we're doing. Yeah.
The last nitpick that I had that kind of caught me off guard was the fire in the shaman's area.
Okay, let me see that. One.
And I'm sure this is another one where it's probably really difficult to fire. And like, what do I know? But it didn't feel like fire to me. And then the noise that they edited in was like this heavy fire crackling, like campfire. But then when you look at the fire, it's a really small one to heat a stove. And to me, they didn't connect. Yeah. It was a different fire. I wish they would have chose a different sound ambience. Mm-hmm. But then when he goes to reach in the fire, the flames are gone. And then like the next shot of the thing, they're like back up. And then they're always back up.
Oh my word.
So it was a really weird thing where like, where did the flames go in that one moment?
Oh my word. Yeah, you're right.
Inconsistency with how close they are to the light. Mm-hmm. And then at one point there's like some of the fire speckle, or I call it fire dust, that's like rising near her face, but it wouldn't make any sense because the fire is like 5 feet away from her. So why are these specks coming right in front of her face?
Right.
You know,
I think that's a good glimpse into the nitpickiness that Tim can get to. You're not wrong whatsoever. But man, that's pretty nitpicky.
Like I wish I could be on a film review, not to like make people feel bad, but just to like push these kind of weird inconsistencies of, hey, someone might notice this, like a really ornery kid in Wisconsin may notice these technical errors.
I think it's also the size of the team. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine. I can imagine someone being given this shot and be like, "All right, we need you to model texture shade. This it's just a tent. You know, it's a small space. It's just a tent. It's a classic like understatement of like what's actually in the scene, or the fact of creating fire. Like there's a whole science to understanding like how to create a fire, a good fire, and like how to manipulate fluid simulation and stuff like that. And it kind of takes a very talented person to get that looking very good in my experience. And so they must not have had that person, and someone who's not experienced just has to crank it out, you know?
Yeah.
Because it was a very small team, even with 14 people, which is what I think calculated at the end. That's a very small team. And I mean, I worked at Real Effects, which had like 200 people working on the film that I worked on, and it was not detailed, you know? Like it wasn't great in terms of the detail. So I don't know. It's just it's a difficult thing to cover all the bases really, really well. That to say, you're not wrong. Like those are very true about the fire, and it's inconsistent.
But that's why it's like good to point out what was done right and why it was such a technical marvel at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
and the nitpicking is literally just to like continue to constructively try to build better quality works in the future.
Absolutely. Right.
But
in that. Go ahead.
Literally, I just want to say one more thing, and then I'm done. The decision to have a hole at the top of the shaman's tent really bothered me too. I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm watching the scene again. It's a really big hole. It's like 3 to 4 feet. And she was just being pulled in from like a snowy area. And when it's snowing, and there's nowhere in the tent that would imply that there was snow in his tent, or that it melted, or that there's some on like the rafters, or some kind of environment that was outside being pulled in the inside if you're going to make a decision to have a hole to connect the two.
I'm trying to
Wait, where's the hole?
Yeah, does it show the hole?
Yes, it's like right when he brings her, it's like the cut into his tent.
Oh, there it is. I think I just missed it.
And you see this giant hole.
Yeah.
I wish they just would have not. I know it's such a small thing, but it's little things like that throw me off.
All right, hold on. I got to see it. Oh, by the way, right here, the texture on the rock, like really close up of the rock. That's awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Nice depth of field that we were talking about. Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, that's a solid like 3 or 4 foot hole.
I think it was just snowing pretty hard in that battle with the assassin guy.
Man, though now that I'm stopped on this frame, like the detail level on everything is great.
It's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes, that looks beautiful. I've not noticed
like
really
hand tattoos and everything.
Oh
like,
my goodness, gorgeous.
Yeah, they did it's like henna, or I guess it could be a tattoo. They did such a good job with that, and they don't point it out more. I would have almost pointed like had his hands, like close up of hands at some point, because they're really well done.
I really do think that all the negatives that we're talking about are purely a result of like an overly ambitious project with a small team.
Yep. And nitpicking.
Yeah, and then we can't not nitpick it, especially when we get into the technical things, and that's our world, and we study that and critique the crap out of that stuff all the time. We have to do it, but yeah, it's a crazy ambitious project. I had a couple other things. Okay, as far as the quality, I wanted to point out in a good way the tree.
Before you get into the
go ahead.
Good ones, the one that stood out to me was like the very last scene where she drops her belt on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm looking.
And then it like pans up.
Super detailed, right? Wait, which
Well,
is that negative or bad? Negative or good?
Well, go back a little bit to like where she actually drops it on the ground, and then it pans up. Yeah, right there, where it's like everything's super bumped,
almost too much. So yeah,
and it all kind of like blends into each other. I don't know. For me, that just like looks very game-ish, what all of my renders looked like when I first learned how to use bump mapping.
It's got that. It almost starts to look like noise. It's so like what is it? The like a sharpen filter, like overly sharpened.
Yeah.
I agree with you there. It's funny because I was gonna say once it pans away from that, and it stops, and you got that beautiful flower and all the glorious
It's gorgeous.
detail.
There's like hair on the flower.
Right, beautiful.
And like so much detail.
And that same high frequency bump looks better from this distance and this framing. And and this final shot to me looked beautiful, but yeah, I didn't even consider, like, you're right, when that belt drops. Then there's a couple scenes where the bump map kind of gets out of hand, maybe trying to ask too much from the bump map. One thing I wanted to point out is the tree, and someone mentioned it in the chat how beautiful the tree looks. And I agree, it's right before they get into the cave, she gets into the cave, and there's this, I don't know, I always thought of it as like a Lord of the Rings style tree.
Oh yeah, that's the logo.
Yeah, it's the logo. And does anyone get what the tree is for? Because it's featured in the logo. It's officially, I think, part of the Sintel branding. But I've never understood the significance other than, like, there's this cool tree growing outside of the cave that she's trying to get to.
I mean, now that I know durian is a fruit, maybe it's a durian tree.
I gotta confirm that. You might be dead on. Let's see, durian tree.
Actually, that'd be awesome if that's a connection. Because otherwise, I'm like, the more that I'm thinking about the tree, the more I'm not liking this thrown in.
Oh
It's supposed
no,
to have meaning, but
It's
doesn't.
not a durian tree.
it's not looking like a durian tree.
Darn it.
Oh. I think that's the symbol for where dragons live, is what Zach is saying. That's true. That's what I kind of started to think, is the more I thought about the tree was the land of the gatekeepers, whoever the gatekeepers are. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what they call the dragons. But like, where did she get this staff from? She got it from that guy who tried to kill her just because they were in the mountains. And then, so he has some connection to the tree, or the land where the tree is at. So she's trying to get there, and that's where her one dragon in all of dragon species happens to be in that one cave. So it to me felt like these things were existing only for the story and no other reason.
Oh, and you know how I feel about that.
But I didn't actually mean to go. I did want to ask, did anyone get the tree? Like what it meant? But I would say that this scene looks gorgeous. The detail level in the bark, amazing. The grassy kind of limbs or leaves on the tree, which now I'm thinking about it, like, that doesn't look like leaves, but it looks really cool. And then the rocky face of the texture of the mountain looks incredible. So
The mountain, I would say, looks spot on.
yeah. So anyway, I wanted to point out, like, how high quality that image is, but the purpose was questionable.
You know what? Now that you mention it, like, that mountain is such a different mountaintop that we saw in the opening shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to decide which one would I prefer, like the more stylized version, or do I like this very close to reality one?
So
like,
there's
which one fits the setting more?
So there's a lot about the end, this end sequence in the cave, that I think they attacked last and had a lot more knowledge going into it. And so that's why you get a better quality. I feel like the opening snow sequence was early on, and you see some results from that, because you're right. It looks, the rock quality is so different from this one to that one. I think that has to be the reason.
When I like click back and forth, they look like two different shorts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. But that was meant to just, give a thumbs up to whoever did the tree and this scene in general. There's a couple other ones I mentioned. I thought the old Sintel looked good. I thought that the messiness in her hair was a nice upgrade. Yeah. Okay. So here's a shot. I think it actually looks better than the clean, combed version of hair, which is kind of a classic CG problem. Making stuff weathered or beaten up or dirty is always easier than making it look clean. But that is a big thing that is well known, notorious in Sintel, I think, is the hair. It was featured a lot in the documentary, like, talked about how hard it was to deal with the hair. But Tim, you said you liked the way the hair was. Is that right? You said that just a few minutes ago.
The old version?
I thought you meant it in general.
Oh no,
I think he's just specifically talking about the rain.
The rain scene. That's right. I'm sorry, I forgot that part of the context.
Yeah, before that, it did kind of look like a video game character.
Okay, right. And from what I remember about this project, I think that they released maybe the trailer initially to, like, stir excitement, and they got so much feedback from the community about the hair that they completely revisited the hair again. I think it was just notoriously problematic. And even Campbell was saying in the documentary, like, he's one of the developers, like, coding Blender, and he was like, I kind of wanted to, I didn't want to have much to do with the hair. I know enough. He said, I know enough to not want to deal with it. But I think so. It just was like this monster in the production. Like, we have to have the hair, but man, it's hard to get it to look good. And it seems like something that was frequently composited outside of the scene, or, you know, like separately and then put back together. But there are some scenes where it kind of looks like it's glowing and the lighting's completely off from the rest of the body. But anyway, I won't go down there. I think it's pretty.
Jose, if we're also going to give like compliments right now, can we just give a good big compliment to like Scales in the entire cave scene? I think he was done really well. I thought the lighting was very well. It was lit, but very. I want to say with like one or two lights, and it gave a spec map to his entire texture that was thrown at him, and I thought it really read well.
Yeah, I completely
that
agree.
scene specifically, I think I remember from the documentary that's when Pablo came in and he kind of stepped up as the lighting guy.
That makes sense. He knows what's
that totally makes sense.
Yep.
They did a good job.
So a really fine, intricate thing that I wanted to point out is the scene where she in the cave when the camera pans down and she sees the scar on his wing and realizes that it's Scales. That subsurface shading that's going on there is amazing. I love it. It's got that. I spent a decent amount of time with subsurface shading, and I know how difficult it is. But that looks so good to me. I watched that scene back in over and over. It's just got this quality to it that feels very real. I don't know how to even describe it, but subsurface can go so bad so quickly that like all the veiny texture going on inside. Oh man, it's great. I really wanted to point that out. But
I agree.
Scales, to your point, Scales look awesome in the cave. Anything else? Do you guys have any last comments? I did want to, the last one, I mentioned that sometimes the hair seemed to glow, and there was a scene I had. Where was that? Here's an example where the hair, I'm at the beginning where she meets Scales again, and the hair is particularly desaturated and kind of glowy. It seems like outside the bounds of what shadows should be happening to her head. And then there's one where in the shaman tent where the rug. There's one where the rug is fur, I believe. Let me play and just get to that part. It's where they're talking. Hold on a second. His beard looks pretty good, the shaman.
Is it green?
Ooh, maybe.
We'll let that one slide.
Okay, so here's the rug that is fur, and to me, there's no reason for this lighting, like for the shading quality. It looks like it's glowing, like it's emissive. But I don't know, maybe that's too nitpicky. Anyway, I shouldn't end it on a bad note. What's one more good thing? Let's see, because it does feel like we're bashing the crap out of it, but it really is impressive given the team and the whole context.
Freaking long it is compared to all other short films.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely easy to nitpick, almost 10 years later and point out what could be improved upon technically. But I guess if we're just looking at what it was, I mean, it really was a marvel at the time. And I remember watching this in the classroom thinking this was really well done and really well rendered. And I wasn't looking at the inconsistencies that I think it's very easy to when you objectify it, because then you're kind of looking for errors so that you can, what can be talked upon to improve upon, but the initial impression still remains the same. And usually you're not taken out and like, oh, that fire doesn't look like fire. Why did it go down?
Right.
But when you rewatch enough times, you pick up on things.
Right.
But no, I think as a whole, like what a great film to set Blender, I would say, into a different direction or into a different conversation from that point forward.
Yeah, I think so.
And about the story, we can definitely say it's simple, but it's enough that we can ignore the inconsistencies or like ignore the things that might pull us out of it. And like the story is strong enough that even when things are looking a little bit odd, it still pulls you in.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that this story, I wouldn't describe it as simple. I actually think there was a lot of polish, a lot of thought put into it. And it's complex in the way that it affects.
I didn't mean simple in that regard.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I would say familiar, and I've kind of seen these elements before. In that way, but it does not mean that he didn't push the story into every little fiber, nook and cranny of the film. Sorry, I don't know. I when I heard you say it, I thought I described it earlier as simple, and I wanted to clarify if I did that.
Oh no, that makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, it really is a good film. I think having artists here looking at it, I feel a need to like justify why we were so critical of it. But hopefully that's also kind of why you guys are here. You're the artists who want to make things like this, and you can look at what happens during a production, where cut corners unfortunately have to happen, or where you can be mindful to not do that in the future.
Or even like sharpen your own visual eye.
Yeah, exactly.
And definitely go watch the documentary, like we already said. Just even watching that and hearing all the troubles that they went through, I felt like I related to that so much.
Right.
Like even on some of the small projects that we've done.
Oh my goodness, yeah. If we should critique our own projects the same way. At some point, like even this out, because I mean everyone has to do it. You cannot get away from cutting corners. Production is not for the faint of heart.
Well, we'll have to finish one first.
To your point, yeah. Zing. Yep. Oh man, that's great. So why no bunny live stream? Omar, you're in the chat. So we're gonna do Big Buck Bunny. I think that's what you mean. We're definitely gonna do that. It was the second film, yes, and I love that film. So I'm excited to do that one. I'm super pumped to do the Cosmos Laundromat, because that is that's the only Blender film that I go back to and watch for non-technical reasons. Like I get lost in that story. I get emotional in that story. So we'll cover all of them at some point, for sure. And with that said, it's kind of been, we've gone like an hour and 40 minutes. That's pretty good. Oh boy.
Yeah.
But go watch the documentary. Really interesting. And I think I don't see any other questions. Let's see. Actually, did you see the old man from the first movie in the marketplace scene? The shaman was in the marketplace scene? Let us go look.
Old man from the first movie, like from Elephant's Dream?
Really?
Oh, let's play that scene.
That'd be a nice little Easter egg.
Yeah, let's see if we can find that.
Oh, when they're running?
Yeah, where would that have been? Did you find it? All right, we got to be getting close. When the chicken starts tearing down the aisle, or the alleyway. Okay. I'm looking. Oh, okay, there's an old man. It's not him. There he is. Yep. Okay, so it's when she knocks over the crate of apples on the far right. There's Prug.
Oh my god.
Oh my word, that's from Elephant's Dream. If you guys didn't know,
that's funny.
Yes, that is brilliant. They're great about putting Easter eggs in their films.
Gotta.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks guys for watching. I'm sorry about the hiccup in the middle where the stream cut out. Thanks for sticking around. But with that, I think we maybe close out. Tim, thanks for being here. Lampel, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Always fun.
Yeah. So is there anything like, Tim, I mean, do you want to promote anything? Like, are you working on anything or your stream that you want people to know about?
Yes. Be kind to others.
Come on, man. That's too good.
My ending statement.
That's great. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, be kind to each other. I feel like that's also what Ellen says.
Oh, is it really?
Maybe not verbatim. It's a good thing to push forward.
All right, guys, as a real end one though, I would, when you guys create your stuff, like have a critical eye and don't be afraid to objectify what you're creating, because oftentimes you get so attached that you can't see the minor mistakes, and maybe that's what happens in productions even like this. And sometimes you got to pull back. You got to really look at your stuff objectively and critique it constructively.
That'll preach.
Yeah.
That's good, man. All right. Well, we'll do this again soon. We'll do another film review. And thanks so much for watching. And have a good rest of your Tuesday. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.